just let me begin with a short history of liberal arts education. It has actually a long history, and this could be traced back to the ancient Greeks and Romans when they developed the concept of a liberal education. And the idea was that you need to have a liberal education to train a person to the fullest by giving the person not just the critical faculty, but the ability to reason and undertake civic duty. And this, if done correctly, will develop a person to the fullest. So if you look at the subjects, it's about reasoning, it's about logic, it's about communication, and then of course, it's the sciences as well, the natural sciences. So it's actually a misconception to think of liberal arts education as simply just the humanities. So the full title is actually Liberal Arts and Sciences, and this we take pains to explain to our students because they shouldn't assume that coming to Yale-NUS, they're just going to do history, philosophy, and literature. We do have the physical sciences, we do have the line sciences, and the mathematical sciences. But the underlying philosophy is not the subject, but it's the purpose of studying those subjects. And this is to provide training for critical reasoning, debate, and dialogue, because these are the attributes that a learned man, an educated person, would need to be an active participant in civic life. Now, fast forward several centuries, and then you see that liberal arts education has continued to thrive, especially in North American universities. And it has actually been a very distinctive feature of higher education in America. So the whole idea of discussion and dialogue, or what they call the Socratic Method, is a central piece of the kind of liberal arts education that for many years have flourished in the United States. And the outcomes are clear. You develop students who are able to think independently, critically, students who are able to deal with a diversity of views, a plurality of perspectives. And a third part, which is very important and sometimes underemphasized in my view, is the ability to develop some form of a moral compass. There is now a move away from this sort of education. And this is driven by very practical considerations, by considerations of employability, the concerns that a philosophy major in a liberal arts college is not going to contribute to the economy. So you see increasing interest in Asia, among some countries in Asia, for a liberal arts education, either on its own or embedded in some of its bigger universities. And there you see the trend of diversification from specialized technical university programs to a broadening. In Singapore too, you see that the keyword now is called pathways, developing different pathways for students, because the belief was that now students of different talents and capabilities and aptitudes should have different ways of excelling. There could be pathways that would cater to students with more technical inclination, pathways for students who prefer a more broad education, and so on and so forth. So the whole idea was that you broaden up the scope for students. And the liberal arts model is one such aspect. The liberal arts education or the liberal education does develop certain attributes which I think are important not just to an economy like Singapore, which is fast developing, but economies all over Asia, which are also moving up the value chain. So, as I explained earlier, through its long tradition, the liberal arts education has always been aimed at making students better informed citizens. Actually, there are very practical issues to economy and society, in that if an employer is looking for someone who can think out of the box, who's able to communicate very effectively, who's able to find creative solutions that may not be found in one part of the operations, but able to connect the dots, able to cross boundaries, able to work with different groups of people, and bring together different aspects of knowledge into a solution. Now, those are the kinds of hopefully graduates that liberal arts colleges should produce. If the economy is going to grow in that way, you need that kind of adaptive creativity. It's not just about the curriculum, but it's what goes on beyond the classroom. And that's why a lot of effort is invested in developing activities for the kinds of exposure for students to travel, internationalization, for them to work in diverse groups, for them to have experiential training. I'm probably not alone in thinking that many countries in Asia are beginning to introduce liberal arts colleges, as I say, either on its own or as part of a larger university. And this trend might just continue. Yale-NUS is not a branch of Yale in Asia. It's a partnership between Yale and the National University of Singapore. It is an autonomous college within the National University of Singapore, which means that the college has the independence to develop its own curriculum, to recruit its own students, to recruit its own faculty, and chart its own future. It's a partnership that is drawn on a clean sheet of paper and left for us to imagine what we would want to do and how we can offer something that's unique and special. We are a community of learning. So it's not about just teachers and students on two sides, but we learn together. So they feel that they're part of a community. And this community of learning is important because it doesn't stop at the classroom. The moment they walk out, they're still learning. So they eat together in a dining hall. We have residential fellows in the residential colleges. Our space is designed to create these communities, nestled communities as we call them. We are able to draw the best learning method, the Socratic liberal arts method of questioning, of engaging, of dealing with different views, of diversity of views, free exchange of ideas, but in a cultural context, in a context where so many exciting things are doing. If you are studying urban studies, if you're studying environmental challenges, if you're studying global affairs, you have all of Asia to learn from. But your lessons should not be limited to Asia, but it should be for the world. The curriculum is based on the kinds of discussion-based method that I talked about. So classes are small. They all live in our 3 residential colleges, and basically there's a lot of emphasis on informal learning as well and community engagement. Experiential learning is very important. It's not just theory. It's not just reading philosophy. It's not just reading history. It's actually doing things drawn from the learning that you have taken in the class. So an experiential learning is actually a very integral part of our curriculum. And here is where we talk about specialization versus broad-based learning. At Yale-NUS, as in most liberal arts colleges, the major is actually just about 1/3 of the overall curriculum. And the common curriculum is not based on a distributive model. In other words, it's not you choose your modules according to the basket. It is actually all the courses are designed from them. So we ask ourselves, what courses should we provide for the common curriculum that will give them the kinds of intellectual foundations for them to then go on to do their majors? And we ask the question in the following way: what does an educated man or woman need to know in the 21st century? And of course, they have electives to do. So the whole idea is that after 4 years, you will have a student who may major in physics, but has done enough philosophy, arts and humanities, history, to really have a complete kind of education, and not just be a geek or kind of a deeply specialized physics major. I show this picture because it basically also highlights the kinds of things that we try to do at Yale, and that is we try to bring the East and West together. So the learning is not just on Western traditions. So this is Aristotle and that's Confucius, and students have to know both. And then, of course, the kinds of outside activities that we organize for them. What we have is a very unique feature of the college called Learning Across Boundaries, or LABS, L-A-B-S. Now, here is where the office that I mentioned, SITE, will organize these regular trips. And these are not excursions. These are not junkets. These are actually well thought out trips that are led by faculty. So we make a call to faculty and say, what would you like to do? Or would you like to offer a course that is taught outside the classroom? The students then go on site, led by faculty, sometimes more than one, and then they go on a learning process to understand what happens on the ground. And they are there learning it, not just from books, but from watching, from experiencing, from seeing, from talking to people. But I also don't want to be presumptuous and to be conceited and say that it's the only model. It is a possible model. It is a model that we can think about. So it's a pathway. It is also possible to conceive of it in another way, and that is to draw out some of the essences of liberal arts education and embed it in a big university, right? So I mentioned three. So the first is broad-based multidisciplinary learning. Now, you could be a top-notch engineering school or a business school, but that does not stop you from borrowing some of this multidisciplinary engagement. The second part is experiential learning. I think that's important because it's not enough just to teach students theory in a classroom and say it ends there. And then character development. This is something I feel very strongly about. It's not enough just to be an intelligent person. It's not enough just to be a first-class honors or whatever you call it. But you must have the moral attributes, the moral compass to make good use of the kinds of opportunities that you've had. I think in this world that is changing so rapidly, globalized, interconnected, and ambiguous, I think we need a group of people, workers, leaders, game changers, change makers, who have that broadness of mind, who have the ability to make connections, who have the ability to adapt to rapid changes, and then who also have the moral compass to deal with the kind of world that can be very challenging and frightening in so many ways. And I believe that a liberal education contributes to that.